What we're going to look at now is what happened after the Battle of Hastings in the few years after 1066.
No, I've actually stabbed, I hold my hands up and I've stabbed a teddy bear to death with blunt scissors.
So why has Dale been stabbing teddy bears? Well, it's all in a good cause. It's all about helping students to understand what was happening in England after the Norman conquest of 1066, helping them understand the changes and the fears of the English and the Normans. This is an activity that needs a very careful setup. So how does Dale set up this activity?
The setup's absolutely crucial, and each year we're probably getting better at it, building the sense of excitement as well. The kids quite enjoy the fact that their homework before the lesson is to hunt around and to try and pull out all their action men, cuddly toys, Barbie dolls, farmyard animals, Lego bricks, farmyard buildings that they've got, and they're told to bring them to the next lesson. So it builds that sense of excitement in terms of what's going to happen next lesson, why have we got to bring all these things in. We also borrow music from our music department, as medieval sounding as they can offer. I think it's normally Tudor, but I don't think the pupils know the difference.
Now it's time to start the activity again. William has been crowned, and the English and the Normans are eyeing each other suspiciously. What we're going to look at now is what happened after the Battle of Hastings in the few years after 1066. At the relationship between the Normans, here in the black bibs, looking threatening and possibly a little smug, having won the Battle of Hastings, and the English. You are English landowners. We have the north, the Midlands, East Anglia, the southeast and the southwest. You are English landowners who still own your lands, but what's going to happen next? We've cut this first stage of the activity because it's so simple. What it involves is you as teacher going up to the English and asking them, now that William's king, what they're afraid of and what might make them rebel. And then you go over to the Normans and ask them what kind of rewards they're hoping for, and whether, if the English do rebel, they think they'll win. This establishes the fears and ambitions of both sides and gets the students thinking about why some rebellions succeed and others fail. Now what I'm going to do is go through the events of the next few years and look at what happened. I'm going to play the part of William, and we'll see what happens with each rebellion. So what did William say to start with? Je suis le roi Guillaume. Harold est mort, et je suis maintenant le roi d'Angleterre.
I am King William. Harold is dead, and now I am King of England.
Vous êtes tous des propriétaires importants. Je pourrais enlever votre terrain et le donner à mes soldats.
You are all important landowners. I could take away your lands and give them to my soldiers.
Mais je ne veux pas faire ça.
But I will not do so.
Je vais donner à mes soldats seulement le terrain des hommes qui sont morts au combat. J'étais généreux envers vous. Donc, vous serez dès maintenant fidèles envers moi.
I will give my soldiers only the lands of men who have died in battle. I have been generous to you, so now you will be loyal to me.
So William's response isn't to bring in the Normans all over straight away. He takes the opportunity. So would you like to come in? And if you can shove up and take less land, and to give a little land to his soldiers. an English landowner in the Midlands called Edric the Wild, and some Welsh kings rebel. And William, of course, beat them. This is how William responded. Je suis votre roi. Vous êtes révolté contre moi, donc vous perdrez votre terrain. Je vais donner à mes soldats votre terrain.
I am your king. You rebelled against me, so you will lose your lands. I will give your land to my soldiers.
So would you like to lose status and sit on the floor? And if you would like to come in, just one of you, and sit above them in a superior role. Vous Anglais travaillerez pour mes Normands.
You English will work for my Normans.
So, rebellion and its results. The next year, we have a rebellion in the southwest after King Harold's sons sailed over from Ireland and attacked Bristol. The rebellion in the southwest follows the same course and has the same results as the previous one, so we've speeded it up. Next year, 1069, comes another very serious rebellion, and it's serious because it involves not only the north but also the Danes. The Danes come in and invade, as does the King of Scotland, and William has to march north to win back control of the area. It takes a good deal of fighting. There's a lot of destruction by the English, a lot of murders of Normans, and ultimately William forces the Danes back and punishes the locals. Cette révolte a été très dangereuse. Je punirai le Nord si sévèrement que personne n'oserait jamais encore se révolter contre moi.
This rebellion has been very dangerous. I will punish the North so severely that no one will ever dare to rebel again.
And that's what William did. The chronicler says that there was no living creature left between the Tees and the Humber. He killed people, he killed the animals, he destroyed the farms. People fled, refugees fled from William's destruction of the north and reached places like Worcester. A long way to go on foot to flee the destruction of the Normans. And William builds another castle. And so we can proceed. Another year, another rebellion, a rebellion in East Anglia. We've also speeded up the rebellion in the Fens, although there's a lot to be explored with Hereward and the Danes if you wish. But it's time to move on to debriefing. Here are some of the questions you can ask after the activity. Why have I done it in French? Why have I been shouting at you in French? Why didn't rebellion succeed? Were these people rebels? Rebels, freedom fighters? Are these people terrorists? Why have we cut the teddy bear's ear off? You know, I've done this before and I've had teachers saying, no, don't. Not only that, what else? Impact. You've got to think about these things from a child's, student's point of view. They're going from a lesson of science to a lesson of geography to a lesson of maths. What's going to make history stand out? What's going to make them... Do you remember when we did? Do you remember when we cut the teddy bear's ear off during the Norman conquest? Is that likely to work more than, do you remember when we did page 62 and read sources A, B and C? You know, there's not much doubt which of them is going to be more memorable. And more memorable not just because it was fun, but because we can use it again. In Key Stage 3, we do other rebellions. We do the Peasants' Revolt. We might do the Pilgrimage of Grace, the Civil War, people rebelling in the 19th century for votes. The kinds of things we might learn about why rebellions happen, we can return to them, provided they're memorable.
I think they really, really get into it. I think being told to line up in silence outside the room, being led in, being directed where to sit, the music playing in the background, the fact that the classroom all of a sudden is laid out like England at the time. Everything's different, and it's quite good because it puts them a bit on edge and it quietens them down, and it's the, well, once again, a bit like with the homework, what's going to happen next element to the lesson. So actually they get very, very involved and engaged in the lesson, and they actually forget where they are for an hour. Some of the feedback comments were really interesting. You know, we actually thought we were in the Middle Ages. We thought we were an English landowner or a Norman knight. So I think that's really, really important. It's a real break. You know, they've just had an hour of algebra, so it represents a real change to the normal pattern of the school day. It's almost like, you know, the TARDIS has come along and transported them to a different age. I think it really helps because I normally give the English landowners about 2 or 3 minutes to set up. So they do quite ornate patterns, and they build their Lego houses, and they put their animals exactly where they want them. So there's a real sense of ownership and hurt when in a split second all their hard work goes down the drain, as William, you know, sweeps through their lands and smashes everything to bits. So I think that's really, really important. There's a sense of anger, and there's also the sense, you know, we spent a long time doing that, you know, that was ours. So the sense of ownership, I think, is really important. It gives them a really clear sequence of the key events. I think they see that the land ownership didn't just happen, you know, didn't just change hands immediately, that it was a gradual process over a few years. The different colour bibs really help because obviously they're looking around the classroom and they see it gradually, land ownership becoming more and more dominated by the yellow bibs and the English landowners gradually disappearing. So I think that definitely helps. They see it as a turning point, obviously, but a turning point that took 4 or 5 years. I think before, looking at it from a textbook and not going into perhaps so much detail about the activity, they thought it was a split decision. William comes in, land ownership changes hands automatically. I think the other thing that they learn is how scary it must have been for these invaders to come in speaking a different language. I think the language is absolutely crucial. Shows the power of language, that, you know, in those times as today, language is power, and it's very disconcerting if someone is ranting at you and you haven't got a clue what they're saying. So I think it taught them, you know, to get on in William's England, you needed to learn the language. First time we followed it up, we didn't really spend too much time. We had a really interesting discussion, and the kids demonstrated really good recall and understanding, and they'd got the sequence of the events, and they understood, for example, why the English rebellions had failed, because they didn't rebel together. There were isolated rebellions in different parts of the country. But what we actually do now, I think, is far more dynamic and continues with the motivation engagement built up during the active learning activity. So what pupils do now is they actually storyboard a section of a documentary looking at what happened after the Norman conquest. When they study the Battle of Hastings, we use Sharma's History of Britain, and that stops nice and neatly with 1066 and Harold's death. What they have to then do is to storyboard plan the next 3 minutes of that particular documentary. It's really good because you can then compare it to what actually Sharma does in his History of Britain. So it puts them in the role of the historian using the knowledge and understanding that they've built up through the active learning activity.
So, William is still king and the English rebels have been defeated. This activity was developed after I'd read an article by a Dutch historian who compared the Norman occupation of England in the 1060s with the Nazi occupation of Western Europe in the 1940s. This idea stressed the importance of occupation and fear, and that's an idea it's very difficult to build up for students, particularly if you follow a textbook. It's so important to do this actively, so important to push the English down onto the floor, humiliated now they've lost their lands. It's so important to destroy the North as violently as you can, taking the ear off that teddy bear. And that's why it's so important to use language, because in the 1060s, the English really didn't know what the Normans were saying. So, it's up to you to take your courage in both hands and to put your crown on, and to help the students suspend their disbelief. As a king, you stand 2 inches taller, and you begin. Je suis le roi Guillaume.